Hey good people, Batavia here. So I'm going to deem this the age-old question for container gardening, and that's, does the container size really matter? If you're not asking yourself that, you probably should be, right? So I have things growing in 2-gallon containers up to 20-gallon containers and everything in between. I've grown in varying size containers over the years, and in short, the answer is yes, it does. But it's not a one-size-fits-all. So we're going to dig in today how my summer plants are doing. And I preface it as summer plants because the story is a little bit different when it comes to things that are growing and enjoy cooler weather. So think your spring and your fall plantings, kind of what does well in certain containers and the kind of conditions around it differ a bit. But to focus on today, we're going to start off with what's really doing well, because that's where we like to start, and then we're going to dig into a couple of things that are struggling a bit, and let's talk about whether or not it's the container size or some other factor. All right, let's dig in. So we started over here, and I want to bring us back. I think the most common size container to grow in is going to be about 5 gallons. These are 5-gallon nursery pots. This is what it looks like. I grow in 5-gallon buckets as well, and you can grow a lot of things in this size container. One of my favorites is going to be peppers. What we're looking for is, are the plants reaching their full potential? And I'm going to use plant size and then the actual fruit from the plant to determine that. This is about the size that I'm expecting from this bell pepper. So that's a really good indication that it likes where it's growing and it likes that 5-gallon size. Here are some 7-gallon containers. Jimmy Nardello and then Triple Delight. I've grown Triple Delight in, I'd say, an ideal planting situation, and that's the size that those peppers get. This means to me that this plant, again, the factors: placement, how I've managed it over the season, container size, it's thriving. I have something like lemon balm here. It spreads, plenty of room to grow. And then I have a summer squash that has been terribly impacted by the squash vine borer all season long. So while it looks a little pitiful, and it truly does, it's still producing, right? So we do still have some squash here, but look at the size of the plant compared to what we're going to see in the backyard with a larger size container. So these are the considerations when it comes to deciding what goes where in a particular container, because it absolutely is going to influence how much you get from that container. Okie doke, quick housekeeping items when it comes to container gardening. Container size, I'm going to stand on this hill and say it's the most important thing when it comes to the success of your container gardening. The types of plants you're placing in particular containers and the size of those containers absolutely matter. There's some other factors though. Quality of soil you're growing in, the placement of that container, how much sun based on the placement is that particular plant or those plants getting, how are you caring and feeding for it. These things absolutely matter. Are you watering it enough? Does it have the proper nutrients, which ties back to the quality of soil as well? You know, do you have some compost in those containers? You know, have you fertilized those containers? The season you're growing in matters. So since we're focusing on summer plants, it's probably the most stressful time for container gardening. And I think it's a really good representation of how well things are doing, assuming all of those other baseline factors are adequate. So that Jimmy Nardello plant in a 7-gallon container in a pretty shaded area, but I've been managing it well this year compared to when I grew Jimmy Nardellos in a prime area in a 2.5-gallon container. I'd say this year the one that's up front in 7 gallons produced better, but generally speaking that 2.5-gallon container absolutely produced peppers. But let's take a look at what a larger container can do. So while the 5 gallons and the 7 gallons aren't the smallest, they're probably pretty typical. This is the same type of plant that we were looking at up front. This is the white scallop. More importantly, this plant is also suffered from some squash vine borer damage. But look at how large the plant gets, which generally speaking, it's okay, I think, to say the size of this plant, the amount of blooms that it puts out, ultimately the amount of fruit that I'm going to get. All of that matters when it comes to what I'm going to harvest from this plant compared to the one in the front yard. Now, again, other factors, how much sun, this is getting more sun, a larger container, 20 gallons. This has been attacked by the squash vine borer, but not to the real extent of the one in the front yard. So these, again, all of these factors matter. On the other side of it, all of these are 20 gallons. So we have a tomato plant determinate. It looks pretty pitiful because it struggled all year. Not because of the size of the container, but because of really the way that I've been trying to manage it. It's been hard to keep it watered when it was so much hotter than it normally is in our summers. And while I have fed this container, and generally speaking, it's in a pretty good placement compared to some of my other containers, some of my other raised beds even, it's looking pitiful, but it's still producing. We still have tomatoes. Do we have as many tomatoes as we could get from it? Maybe not, but that's likely due to, again, environmental factors and less about the container size. I keep passing this up. I want to come back to the eggplant that's been hidden. These are Black Beauty. I've seen Black Beauty get a little bit larger, so I'm going to say there is a little bit of restriction going on, but I still would say a 20-gallon container is ideal for a large size eggplant. Can you grow eggplants in smaller containers? Absolutely. You know, will you get the same production compared to a larger container? Maybe not. Now, I really wish I had the variety of this okra. I picked up these transplants, so I'm not sure of the variety, but I have it growing in a raised bed in the front yard, and I think it's maybe just a shorter stature okra. These containers here, where I have corn and okra, there's one okra plant, and then I think it's about 6 corn plants. This container size has worked well for me. It's about 12 gallons. Corn has absolutely been produced, got to full size. I think I've let this get away from me. So the top of it's been a little bit eaten up, but it absolutely has produced a full ear of corn. We're gonna harvest, I think, all of this today. For harvesting my corn, the silks are completely dry and brown. And if I were to pierce the ear, assuming that I'd get a milky substance, I know that it's still in a nice condition to eat. If it's a watery substance for the corn, it's not quite ready. I don't think that's what we'd get from this. And then if it's dry, it's absolutely past its prime. But those are just a couple of notes. The real important factor here is I've grown corn in a couple of different size containers. This is the best placement, I'd say, that it's had. And it absolutely thrived this year. So will I grow corn in containers in the future? Probably so. Would I go smaller than 12 gallons? I'd probably say no. This has proven to me that corn can do well in this size container. This is Silver King is the variety. Let me know what you think about the impact container size has, and if you found sweet spots for growing certain things in certain size containers. My favorite space to grow in for containers along this fence line, we have herbs, celery, peppers. They're varying sizes down here because these are more decorative pots. A pot like this is about 2 gallons, and it's doing wonderful when it comes to how much it's producing from an herb perspective, mint in particular. We have 10 gallons here. This is the same pepper that we had a quick glance at. It's a white bell. I've seen it produce peppers, again, in ideal scenarios, but about that size. It is continuing to grow, which is important. This is maybe a shadier spot, not the most sun, not the shadiest. Smaller the container, the more watering that you're gonna have to do. So my favorite buckets, 5 gallons, with the exception of this one, which is a 4 gallon. And for the type of plant that it has in it, it's a single jalapeno. It does not know the difference jalapenos growing there versus in another 5-gallon container. That 1 gallon has not made a big difference. We look at something like, again, bell peppers, which is a good indicator because it's a larger pepper that it's producing. That's the size that I want for my bell peppers. So I'd be doing us a disservice if I didn't touch upon green stalks and the size of the container. It was one of the things that I was concerned about initially when it came to whether or not I could successfully grow in these planters, and year over year I found it actually, of course, matters, but that just goes to what you're planting. Peppers, which I think do wonderful in green stalks. When I compare them to, let's say, a 5-gallon or a 10-gallon container, am I getting comparable size fruit? Yes. Am I getting the quantity that I would get in a green stalk from a 10-gallon container? Probably not if you're looking at a single pocket. So 1 pepper plant would go into a single pocket here. There's 6 of them. When you start to think about how many pepper plants you can actually fit into this space, then you start comparing it to your 5 or 10-gallon container. I'd say a tier of a green stalk with multiple plants would outperform a single plant inside of a 5 or 10-gallon container. Now, of course, that is one to many. But think about the variety that you can explore. And that was one of the things that I was drawn to. And the biggest piece for me was the vertical growing of it all. So for now, you're looking at pepper plants that just need some wrangling in, but they are absolutely growing, producing. I have some snack peppers, some serrano peppers, beets, which aren't summer, I know, but they did wonderful, and I kind of have to just shout them out. I am loving the bush beans in the green stalks, but really everything that we've talked about today in all of these different size containers can be grown in a green stalk successfully with, in some cases, a few tweaks. Peppers, things like beans, no adjustments really are needed. If you're going to grow an eggplant, look for a smaller variety. If you're going to grow tomatoes, absolutely possible. You may need to adjust which tier you grow in, or better yet, looking for a miniature version of a tomato. The tumbling tom that I've grown in the hanging baskets would do wonderful in a green stalk. They produce all kinds of cherry tomatoes. So when you're considering those things, sweet corn, I've seen with my own eyes, green stalk, the company grows sweet corn. They recommend you use a shorter planter. So there's a 3-tier option, and that's just to manage the size the container or the corn would get to make sure you're able to reach it. Something like okra, I'd recommend if you grow in a green stalk using a shorter variety, something that's going to be shorter in stature. And we think about these other things for summer. I mean, they're kind of endless opportunities. My biggest, I think, benefit is being able to grow vertically using containers, which of course allow me to move them around as I need and really allow me to kind of mix up in a single space what I'm growing. All right, so container size absolutely matters, but so does where you've placed that container, how much sun it's getting, how you're caring for it, how much water, the nutrients that that plant is getting inside of that container. All of those things factor in. If you all have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them below. I'd love to hear from you on, have you found sweet spots for growing a particular vegetable in a particular size container? Drop the comment below. Look forward to seeing y'all on the next one.